Okay. This is this guy's doing a project for National Geographic called the Photo Arc. Was a very famous portrait artist. Then he discovered he really liked biodiversity, so he travels around taking pictures of, like he would like a famous person. He takes portrait photos of endangered animals. Anybody know what this is? Besides like the cutest thing in the whole world. If you don't experience cuteness when you see this, you should check your humanity. It's a baby, it's a tapir, T-A-P-I-R. So cute. Okay. That's the subject. Next phylum. Talked about 3 different phyla of animals. Peripheral. Anyone watch that video and tell me like 2 things about sponges? What's unique about phylum Peripheral, the sponges? Okay. Watch the video.
They don't have tissue, right?
They have no tissue. They're like, you can kind of think of them as like barely multicellular, right? They're multicellular, but their cells are so sort of loosely related to each other that you can put them in a blender. Do you ever see that one where SpongeBob goes through like a sieve and he just like goes into like 1,000 pieces and then comes back together? That's real. Sponges, you can put them in a blender and the cells can live on their own independently, but yet they are sort of related or coordinated enough to come back together and make a sponge. Right? So there's no tissue, they have no symmetry. Phylum Nadaria, which we talked about on Tuesday, they have symmetry, but it's radial symmetry, pizza pie symmetry, circular symmetry. Okay, this phylum, the flatworms, is the first phylum with bilateral symmetry. And that's the, what does bi mean? 2 lateral. It's a lateral pass in football.
To the side.
Off to the sides, and this is a 2-sided symmetry. Okay. What else? You know, sound bites about flatworms. Well, number 1, we're going to talk about 3 kinds of worms: flatworms, roundworms, and segmented worms. The worm part, what does that mean? It just means that they're long without any legs. Okay. So they're vermiform. It's more about the shape. Okay. There are about approximately 10,000 species of flatworms, which is not, it's about the same as the Nidarians, more than the sponges, much, much less than most other phyla though. Okay. They are both free living and parasitic, what's the contrast here? What's free living versus parasitic? Yeah, so there are lots of flatworms that will not live unless they have a specific host. Okay. A lot of our parasites are found in this group. Where do you find them? Yes, everywhere. In the ocean, in fresh water, in the soil, in the gastrointestinal tract of most major animal lineages. You can find them in other invertebrates. Somebody in this group probably has some kind of platyhelminth living in them. It's cool. There's no judgment. Dogs, cats, like every fish, everybody has these guys. Okay. What's the commonality among all of these places? Ocean, freshwater, moist soils. They're all kind of moist places. Right? They're not really resistant to desiccation. As a whole, right, they are monoecious. I don't know exactly how to say it. Let me turn the slide on real quick here. Monoecious. This is the key. The key vocabulary word. I guess works. Okay. Mono. I'm going to break this into 2 every group that we talk about, we're going to compare whether they're monoecious or dioecious. So mono meaning one, and I think ecious means, I think of it as household. I think that's what the root is. Okay. Two households. So if you are a one single household group, then under one roof, mommy and daddy live together. Right? If you're dioecious, the weekend thing, right? Mommy and daddy live in different houses, and we see each other on weekends. Right? If you're monoecious, another way to say this is hermaphrodite. Right, i.e. one body, both male sexual reproduction organs and female reproductive organs. So one body, both genders in that same body. Okay? Dioecious means the sexes are separate. Separate or separate? Separate. Okay. So the male and the female are two different individuals. Okay. And this you're going to see is not entirely uncommon in the animal world. That said, they do have some pride. They don't have sex with themselves. Right? This is not a self-fertilization type of deal. They still have to pair and cross-fertilize. Okay, it's just that they both members of the pair have both ovaries and testes. Right, and many of these also reproduce asexually. So there's a lot of flatworms you can just cut in half, and they'll grow two new flatworms. Okay. They can do both. So anything goes in this phylum. Okay. Monoecious, dioecious. Phyloidosymmetry. We discussed this idea of cephala or headization, cephalization. So in other words, the pattern or the trend in evolution here is that where you find the most of the sensory organs is on the anterior end of the animal, including the concentration of nervous tissue into the brain. Okay, and that's just become it's a good design. It worked well, and therefore most animals you can find some kind of identifiable head. Sponges, no. Jellyfishes, no. They're more diffuse. Everything is, their nervous system is just all around their whole body. But here's our first group of bilaterally symmetrical animals. We'll see those eye spots in the head. They have no body cavity. Okay, so all of their organs and nerves and blood vessels just go right through solid tissue. As opposed to us, right, we have that coelomic cavity, we have a pleural cavity, and we have an abdominal and cranial cavity. These guys don't have any body cavities, but they do have three germ layers, the ecto, endo, and mesoderm. Okay. Mesoderm. It's different than the mesoglia. When you watch the video about cnidarians, I talked about the mesoglia. Mesoderm is different than that. Okay. Platyhelminthes have cells, of course, because they're living. The cells specialize into different tissue types, and the tissues will work together to form an organ. And even here, the organs start working together in rudimentary systems. So we have some way of removing waste from the blood, and then we have another organ that's involved with voiding that from the body. right? We have a brain and eye spots that work together, okay, into rudimentary systems. Flatworms is an apt name. Most of these, well, all of them are flattened, which relates to, we had a long discussion at one point about body, what was that, surface area and volume ratios. Remember that? Why cells are small is the same reason why flatworms are flat, because that allows them to provision oxygen and nutrients and things without complex body systems. Okay? I mean, you can't get very big if you don't have good ways of bringing nutrients to your cells. You can't get big if you don't have a way of removing waste. Okay? So the other way to deal with this is that you just have a very high surface area to volume ratio. So they can basically rely on very passive ways of bringing things in and out. Okay? In fact, many of them have no digestive system at all. Okay? Some of them have this incomplete digestive system, which means one single opening for in and out. You eat, you digest, you excrete from the same opening, okay? The implications of that are you can, if you eat one meal, you digest that one meal, and then you have to wait to excrete that before you eat again. Otherwise, you've got some food that's new and some that's digested, and it's all mixing up in there, okay? If you have a complete digestive system, you can eat over here, you can be mechanically digesting here, you can be chemically digesting here, you can be absorbing here and voiding over there, and as you're voiding, you can be eating more over here. You can just like a conveyor belt. Be bringing it in, extracting all the energy from it, and then out the other. So with our planarian here, they eat, they digest, they poop, or whatever you call it. So we see, again, certainly more complexity than other organisms that we've talked about, but they're pretty darn simple. These are pretty darn simple organisms. Okay. I think you could all be done like a tic-tac-toe or a foot race or anything like that. Here's that. Most animals have this body cavity. This is the coelom, or the body cavity. Here, the flatworms have this solid mesoderm with the endoderm running through it. Some examples here. We've seen these in lab. Here's our, anybody remember what this is called? Roll bananas. The scolex. You know it, Shelby. It was just right there. Yeah. Here's a tapeworm, different kinds of flatworms, all kinds of interesting animals in this group. Okay. 4 classes. So we have kingdom. What's our kingdom we're talking about? Have to check and see to make sure which class you're in. We're in zoology, so a kingdom is always going to be Animalia. Phylum Platyhelminthes. Class, these 4 classes. Turbellaria, Trematode Monogenia, and Cestota. Okay, here's some patterns. The turbellarians are the free-living flatworms. The rest of these guys are all parasitic. Internal, external, and then the tapeworms. We'll go through each of these just real briefly. Try to be realistic with how much detail, because what's going to stick with you. Okay, turbellarians. Here's a couple of important general. We should try this out in the BioBlitz. People have told me that we should try part of this. My friend George, who teaches at Jacksonville State, said, yeah, I'll tell you how to find these guys. You get a 6-pack of beer, and you get some chicken livers, and you go down to the water, and you throw the chicken livers in there, you drink the beer. By the time you're done, you get the chicken livers out, and you've got these little things on the the chicken livers. But we'll just skip the beard part. I'd love to see these because I'm sure that they live here, right? They're either found in very moist, wet soil or in aquatic environments. How about this bullet point? Cilia and mucus glands on ventral surface. How does that relate to how do you envision these things moving? How could a flat worm, this worm, so where's the ventral surface? Up, down, left, right, where's the ventral?
To the front, right?
This is anterior. And this is posterior. What's this one?
Transversal.
No, ventral, right?
This is dorsal. I'm not trying to, I don't want to discourage you.
Whatever side you, I guess,
Yeah.
orient.
So that, yeah, I guess so this would be like dorsal fin is that top end of the fish. So the ventral surface has cilia, what are cilia? Like little hairs, right? We have them in that's how we expel mucus from our trachea and stuff, is they brush them. They have them in their fallopian tube. Well, women have them in their fallopian tubes and moves the egg along. They're little tiny hairs and they move in rhythmic contractions. What's the mucus? Reduces the friction, so they're little mucus layer. It's like a slime trail, and they use these little cilia to move along. Right? They don't have legs. They're not like a snail that uses muscular contractions. They're just sweeping along on these little tiny cilia. Obviously, not the most rapid or efficient way to move, but it worked for them. Okay? It's a very primitive way to move. They have muscles that are both longitudinal, so if this is our worm here, they have longitudinal muscles. It's like a longitudinal cross section, or longitudinal section, longitudinal and transverse muscles. What happens when you contract the longitudinal muscles? That's the thing about muscles. They only do one thing. They only get shorter and relax. Relax. So if longitudinal muscles contract, it's just going to shorten this animal. If the transverse muscles contract, and widen them. Right. Then there's oblique muscles that go like this to allow you to move this way. Okay. So again, more complex than the Darians, but still pretty simple. So we don't really know, is this a good group or is this maybe be broken apart in the future? Because it may contain a bunch of other groups that make it not paraphyletic. Okay, cross section through, we see the intestine. Here we see testes, and we see the ovaries. That's that monoecious. We have sperm ducts. The pharynx here is the opening to the digestive system and the exit from the digestive system. They don't have a mouth at that end. We try to force everything into like a way we work, but animals are very different. Many animals are very different. They just basically suck up things from their environment through the pharynx. This is an example of the excretory system. What is the excretory system all about in animals and in humans notwithstanding? Excretion. What is the kidney, the bladder, all that for? What is the function of the excretory system?
Waste.
Okay, what is the waste? We always think of feces, but it's not that kind of waste, right? what waste is removed? This is something that took me a long time to really understand. Excretory system. This is a basic challenge that every animal faces, is you have to excrete a certain type of waste. Where does that waste come from? Where does our waste come? What's something that you can eat a lot of that would really challenge your kidneys? Milk. Okay, milk to a degree will have a lot of this in there. And that's more of your intestines, if you don't have the right enzymes to break it up.
Yeah.
Right?
Did not hear the word kidney, don't know why.
Kidneys, okay, so kidney, it's about protein. Right? When you break down protein, there's a lot of nitrogenous waste. Things like ammonia are produced when you break down proteins. Okay? That's a very toxic substance. You need to get it out of there. So this nitrogenous waste is what really the excretory system is all about. Our urine contains urea, which is what the form of that nitrogenous waste. Then flatworms have these little organs called flame cells, and it really is very similar to a kidney in a way, in that it is about counter-current exchange and collecting, and then there's a little duct and then an exit port. Yeah. Some examples of marine turbularians, planaria. This is, I saw this guy in China just cruising around in the rainforest. We have something real similar to this that lives around here. You guys ever seen these? They're called Biphallium. It's a hammerhead flatworm. I've seen them up in Pickens County. They eat earthworms. They suck their little pharynx in there and just suck their juices right out of them. Yeah. So, turbularians, free living. Trematodes, parasites. Some really important parasites here. Okay? Some of these cause a lot of issues with human health. They parasitize vertebrates, largely vertebrates here. Okay? Many of them have intermediate hosts. They may be at some point in their life cycle in a snail, some then in a fish, then maybe into a human. All different kinds of birds and mammals contain these trematodes. Okay? And it's really interesting to think of how you design a perfect parasite. You've got to have ways to beat the immune system of the host. Why the digestive system? Because where do most of these things enter the body? How do you get most parasites? Through your food, right? And where does your food go? To your stomach is full of hydrochloric acid. You need to be able to withstand all this chemical breakdown. Okay, here's a couple of, the appearance-wise are similar to turbularians. We're going to look at the life cycle of these two different trematodes, just as examples. I don't know, I mean, who knows what kind of trematodes are here on this campus? It would be, this one Bible that I want to do is really try to get an idea about trematodes. Here's a good example, and I think this came right from the CDC website, because these are in certain parts of the world. This is the Clonorchus, and it is a liver fluke. So here's an adult, lives in the bile duct, right? Like basically part of the gallbladder and near the liver. It is mature. That's the sort of line between mature and not mature is the ability to produce eggs and sperm. They mate. They produce eggs. The eggs go into the environment. Then the egg hatches it basically, I think it's eaten by a snail. Inside of the snail it goes through these different stages into this cercaria, which is like a little free-swimming larval stage. It ruptures out of the snail and swims through the water, somehow gets into a fish. Then the fish becomes encysted into the skin or the flesh of the fish, and then, right, sushi. This is probably why we eat wasabi, right? Is originally that was probably eaten to kill some of the parasites that would have been in the fish, right? And then there's the little encysted fluke, which then grows in the intestine and makes its way back into the bile duct and just around and around and around we go. Okay. So we have three hosts, a snap, a fish, and a human. Okay. See, I think there's another example. That's Clonorchus. Here's what they look like. You're familiar with these at this point. And then here's another one, Schistosoma. Okay, we have the adult lives in the vein, so this is a blood fluid, and lives in the circulatory system. It lives on nutrients in our blood, right? Of course, there's nutrients in our blood. The females produce eggs that enter the intestinal tract or the bladder. The eggs are passed in the urine or the feces into the water. In the water, they get into a snail, right? And then the snail produces these little cercaria, and then the cercaria actually, there's no fish intermediate host here. They actually penetrate into the skin of a human who's in the water, right? And we start this all over again, okay? How do we stop this from happening? Why do we not have schistosoma? Why do we not have a lot of Clonorchus issues in the United States? Where do we break, which arrow do we break on this life cycle? What do you think, Rosa? What do we do that says, okay, no, I'm getting this stuff? What's one sanitary thing that we do? I can think of a couple on this one.
Like that number one, because we try to check our food before we eat it.
So why do we cook food? This is one of the major reasons that we cook food, right? Because other animals are full of parasites. Now, luckily, we also inspect our meat. There's very rigorous inspection that happens with all of our food to check for encysted parasites and things. And then we cook it too, right? What else do we do? What other one do we break here? Probably our fish around here don't have a lot of these in them because, well, there's a lot of snails. But why is there not a lot of Clonorchus eggs being eaten by snails? What do we do with this? It doesn't go, our feces don't go from the colon into the water, right? Because we treat our sewage, okay? Not so in other parts of the world. That's a luxury. Other parts of the world, people don't have the money to pay for sewage systems, so their waste ends up into water, right? And then this happens again and again. Okay, so cooking food, treating sewage, having two different streams for feces and fresh water is part of the way we break that down. Monogenia, this as a group, this one's pretty simple in that they are parasites, but they're external parasites, and they pretty much live on fishes. Okay, external fish parasites, not a big ecological or human health story. So they are only harmful in large numbers, and they basically live on the fish until they reproduce again. Okay. Very simple life cycle. Why is this a good thing for the for the flatworms? That they're only harmful. Think what's a perfect parasite? What's the perfect parasite in its relationship to its host? Is it how harmful should it be to the host?
It should be only harmful over time. Because then expect that the host dies immediately and then.
Right. If you kill your host, then you have no place to live, right? So you see this kind of coevolution between host and parasite. Right? The virus, COVID virus. A lot of times viruses evolve to be less harmful and just more effective, right? Here's a little monogene. Here's the gill rakers of fish. And we see these little dudes just attach on there and they basically absorb some blood through the gills and get their nutrients that way. I'll stay on. The fourth class, the last class, here are the tapeworms. Heavily segmented. You can just look at these things and see the segmentation. Each of those segments is called a proglottid. They are monoecious, they have ovaries and testes. Their head has this hooked apparatus called the stolex. They lack a digestive system. How can you lack a digestive system? What's the only way you can lack a digestive system?
If you get nutrients from something else.
I'm sorry, I said what?
Like if you're getting nutrients, then not.
Okay, if you can, you need a digestive system to obtain, break down and absorb nutrients. So if you have some other way of obtaining those, right, which to me, the best way to lack a digestive system is to live in a digestive system. Really, you just take advantage of all the work that vertebrate host is doing, okay? They have a lot of surface area. They live in largely the small intestine because that's where all of breakdown happens. So there's a lot of nutrients. Before they're absorbed into the gut, through the gut, into the blood of the host, they're absorbed by the tapeworm, okay? Big group, the 10 here, these are the important genera of tapeworms. Okay. We'll see that stolex, we see those proglottids. This is one specific species, so life cycle of tapeworms. Some commonalities. What are we seeing here that's similar or familiar at this point? How do the eggs get into the environment? Really, this explains a lot of psychology. Why are feces universally repulsive? Any culture in the world, why is poo considered to be like so awful? It probably comes down to this right here, right? Because that's where parasites leave the body, right? They live in the small intestine, they leave the body. These little proglottids are filled, can become gravid, or like a pregnant segment on the body. It's gravid, it contains eggs, goes into the environment, ingesting grass that has human poo on it, into the meat. Oncospheres develop into cystocerci in muscle. What's cow muscle called? Hamburger, right? Eat that undercooked. My little sister, when she was like 16 years old, we were eating a hamburger. She just never made that connection. I was like, well, where did it come from? And then, right, insisted into the organ of the human. Okay. Cook the food, cut your fingernails. This is also why moms are crazy about fingernails, right? Look at this stuff on your fingernails. And that is the tapeworm. Okay. Here's a phylogeny of platyhelminthes. You are not going to be responsible for this, okay? I just bring it up to show you a couple of points. I bring it up to give you guys practice in looking at this, to see, to interpret them, looking for patterns. What are the oldest group of platyhelminthes according to this phylogeny? Which of the classes is the oldest class of platyhelminthes? Okay, yeah, this Macrostomidia, so which is probably maybe a family or something. Which it belongs to which class? See now how they're putting this bracket here? It's saying that these three groups are considered the Turbellaria, okay? So the oldest, and why does that make sense? What do we know about Turbellaria compared to all the other three classes of flatworms? They don't need a host, right? So it makes sense for the oldest to be free living, and then these other groups are specializing in parasitizing different animals, okay? And which group of vertebrates came first? Fishes, birds, mammals, or amphibians? What's the oldest group of vertebrates? Which would have been first on Earth? Even before the amphibians, the fishes, right? And look, what's the oldest group of parasitic flatworms? Would have been these. Well, actually, no, monogenes are the fishes, but basically these guys came, and then the tapeworms, which are really specialized in other vertebrates, are some of the newer ones, right? Again, just looking, the new thing here, I guess, is that we can include the whole from here all the way to there. This tells us that all of these guys are platyhelminthes. These little brackets will break down the platyhelminthes into the different classes, right? And then you can see the characteristics on the phylogeny as well. I will get you a copy of this next week, but this is going to become very familiar to you. This is the phylogeny of all animals, okay? And by the end of the semester, you will know this phylogeny very well. So let's go ahead and start filling it out for the animal phyla that we talked about. What's the oldest group of animals? All the way over to the left here. The one that shares the oldest common ancestor with the rest of animals. Who guessed that?
Peripheral, right?
Phylum Peripheral. And again, kind of makes sense given how sort of central they are. They don't have tissues. The whole really independent cells. The cells themselves can do almost everything. Right? They don't have specialized cells. Okay, so peripheral over here. The sponges. Okay, and then we're doing this in order in terms of our lectures too. So peripheral. And then what was the next group? Dauberia. These are the radiant animals like corals, jellyfishes, hydras. That was Tuesday's lecture. And then we're getting into this group here. Here's platyhelminths. Okay. So what is unique about sponges? Really, the thing about sponges is not so much what they have, but what they don't have. Okay, so they lack tissue and they lack symmetry. Okay, so tissue arose here. Okay, and symmetry also arose here. And what kind of symmetry do the Nidarians have? They look like this. Little tentacles. You have to remember what that symmetry is? Radial symmetry, right? And so you could put radial symmetry on here this time. Okay. But now, the platyhelminths have symmetry, but specifically they have bilateral symmetry. Okay. And everybody from here on out, here's us over here. We're going to talk about mammals last, probably, but platyhelminths and all the rest of these phyla have bilateral symmetry. Okay. We're just going to keep building this out. We're going to define what this group is, and what this group, all of these groups, right? Just kind of taking the diversity of animals and making more sense of it, putting them into different classifications. Okay. So that's it. I'm going to can this and upload it. We'll see you guys on Tuesday, folks. I don't know, Monday,